All right, here we go. So today we're going to be talking about mosaic plots. For our activity, we're going to be talking about the West Valley mascot. So what will be the West Valley mascot? The learning targets we want to hit today are a lot like we talked about on Monday. So number 1, classify variables as categorical or quantitative. 2, make and interpret bar graphs for categorical data. 3, use bar graphs to compare distributions of categorical data. And number 4, describe the nature of the association between two categorical variables. Our scenario: when the high school was built in 1969, the school needed to pick a mascot. The principal decided to have the students and teachers vote between 3 choices: Rams, Mustangs, or Prairie Dogs. He took a random sample of students and a random sample of teachers. The results of the surveys are given in the table. So if we're analyzing the table, we can see the different categories of mascots: Rams, Mustangs, Prairie Dogs, and the 2 groups that were randomly sampled and surveyed, so the teachers and the students. Now go ahead and go to statlet.com and create a segmented bar graph for the 2 groups of teachers and students. All right. Now that we have our segmented bar graph with our 2 groups of teachers and students and our 3 groups of mascots, if you were having trouble in Statlet, we use the one categorical variable in multiple groups. So just kind of looking at our segmented bar graph, we could see that Prairie Dogs for students and teachers roughly voted this same outcome there. The Mustangs, we could tell that the students really liked Mustangs in comparison to the teachers. We could tell the teachers really liked Rams in comparison to the students. So number 2, according to your displays, which mascot appears to have the most support? Explain. All right, so for number 2, which one's more popular? If you ended up saying Rams, I would have to agree with you, because if you ended up stacking the bars for Rams, it would be higher than the stack for Mustangs. So, moving on to number 3. Upon hearing the results of the surveys, the students argued that the decision was incorrect because 100 teachers had been surveyed and 500 students had been surveyed. Use this information to fill in the table below with the number of responses. Go ahead and pause and give it a try. Okay, so go ahead and take a look at your two-way table now, knowing that we have 100 teachers and 500 students. So just a quick review. We got the frequency 80 since there was 100 teachers, and we know that 80% of them chose Rams. We just took 80% of 100 and you get 80. The same with students. Since there's 500 students and 30% of them chose Rams, 30% of 500 is 150. And we did that for each category of the mascots. Another thing I highly advise is incorporating a totals row and column. So we can see here that the total number of teachers and students that chose Rams are 230. The total number of teachers and students that chose Mustangs are 310. The total number of students and teachers that chose Prairie Dogs, 10 and 50, is 60. We can also see here the total number of teachers that were surveyed and the total number of students that were surveyed. Okay. Number 4, how many times more students were sampled than teachers? Go ahead and pause and try it out. Okay. If you said 5, I'd have to agree with you, since if we have 100 teachers If we take 5 times 100 to get to 500 students, there were five times more students. 5 times more students were sampled than teachers. So how can we update the third graph in number 1 to take into account the sample size to adjust your graph? So take a moment and think about that. Well, if we're to think that the students were sampled 5 times more than the teachers, we could think of it as adding 5 more bar graphs or segmented bar graphs. So 1, 2, 3, there's 4, and now there's 5, to take into consideration the proportion of students to teachers. So this right here is what we would call a mosaic plot, because mosaic plots take into consideration the proportion of our two groups. So if we go over to Statlet, we can make a much nicer mosaic plot. Go ahead and go to statlet.com. Go to our one categorical variable and multiple groups and make your mosaic plot. Now that we have our mosaic plot from Statlet, go ahead and answer number 5. What should they make the West Valley mascot? Okay, well, let's analyze for number 5. So if we go look at our two-way table, we can see that the total number of students and teachers that chose Rams was 230. The overall total for Mustangs is 310 and 60 for Prairie Dogs. This is displayed here on our mosaic plot, and we could definitely see that the most votes is for Mustangs right here. We can also see that most of the area is taken up by the Mustangs as well. So for number 5, if you said Mustangs, I'd have to agree with you, because the Mustangs, there were more people who chose Mustangs than the other mascots. And we can also see it in the graph above because it covers most of the area. So now we're going to go on to the important ideas. Enter. Okay. So representing 2 categorical variables, the big ideas here, we've been talking about categorical a lot. The other one is quantitative. So the difference between those is categorical variables take on values that are names and labels, where quantitative variables are numerical and measure a quantity. Displays of categorical variables. So far since Monday, we've talked about bar graphs. We've talked about side-by-side bar graphs, segmented bar graphs. In regards to segmented bar graphs, each bar shows the proportion of individuals in each corresponding category. We've also talked about association. If knowing the value of one variable helps us predict the value of the other, the 2 variables are associated. And today we talked about the mosaic plot. So it's a modified segmented bar graph where width is proportional to the size of the group. So width is proportional to the size of the group. So students are 5 times surveyed than teachers. All right. Well, that's a wrap. So go ahead and go do your check for understanding and your homework for today.